20 years, she was the first voice we heard in the morning as the host of Good Morning America. Since then, very, very busy. She's becoming a best-selling author, has become a best-selling author and a wellness advocate. Please welcome Joan Lunden to our couch for the first time. Not the last time. I hope you come back.
We're so happy to finally have you.
It's great to be here.
As journalists, there's a million questions for you.
Exactly.
The most important was, did you watch the royal wedding?
Oh, of course I did. Good question. I mean, I'm a real royal watcher because I covered Diana's wedding and Fergie's wedding and also Kate Middleton's wedding. Notice I did all the girls, but whatever. But this is the first time I just watched from home.
Yeah,
and I loved it.
But you actually had a chance. Let's go back to the Charles, Diana. Like you interviewed Prince Charles.
I got to interview Prince Charles. He came here in the 80s, and I remember Jane Pauley came from NBC, I came from ABC, and Diane was interviewing, was hosting CBS This Morning at the time, Diane Sawyer. And they had us like draw straws to see who would go first.
Wait, are you serious? I thought that was a joke.
I'm serious. No, we went in.
Oh my goodness.
They gave us our little lesson, royal lesson. Oh. You cannot extend your hand before he extends his.
Okay.
You can't speak before he speaks. You can't sit down, because remember you're getting in an interview situation. You can't sit down in your chair before he sits down. You call him your Royal Highness in the beginning and sir thereafter. Like we had all these rules.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you walked out and you were going to be doing this.
Oh my God.
You hoped you would remember it all.
And you're just trying to remember your questions. And now you're like, whoa, what am I supposed to say? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we were given all the royal rules before you could sit down and do this interview.
Sure.
But I mean, he was very stoic, but you know, he was in the United States for a school, a private school that had been started by his mentor, Lord Mountbatten, and he was very enthusiastic about that. But if you just kind of walk, you guys know, when you're doing an interview, you walk them down that path from this institution to education for young people, and you went to this very strict school when you were young, where you were kind of sent away. Is that what you want for your boys?
Right, that's where you go.
And by the way, how are Diana and boys?
But I'm sure however, you were also pregnant at that time, so I bet it made it a lot easier because she was pregnant, wasn't she?
She was pregnant and I was pregnant, and my producer said, isn't this the guy that one time said, keep him barefoot and pregnant? Take your shoes off. I said, I'm not doing that. Oh my, I'm not doing that.
You also had many opportunities to interview so many of our presidents.
Yeah.
One of them being Gerald Ford, and not only that, you developed a friendship with he and Betty, and I understand that you got random phone calls sometimes from the president. That was very memorable.
One of the best parts of that job was, you know, I mean, I was invited to the White House and covered 5 U.S. presidents, and so I got to know Gerald Ford and Betty Ford a little bit better, and so one day my husband is getting on a plane in Los Angeles to fly back home. All these Secret Service come on and say, you know, President Ford is getting on the flight. Would you mind moving back a seat? My husband said, sure. So when President Ford got on the plane, he said, hey, thanks so much for moving. And my husband says, I would have done it anyway. My wife thinks that you're terrific. My wife is Joan Lunden. He says, oh my God, we love Joan. He sits down in his seat. So of course, Jeff immediately takes out his phone and calls me to say, you're never going to guess what just happened. And as he's saying hello to me and saying, guess what just happened, President Ford turns around and says, is that Joan? Are you talking to Joan? Now, meanwhile, I'm in my hometown in this little bathing suit store. And I am in a very small changing room.
No.
And I am about to put on a bathing suit. About to.
So you're...
The next voice you're about to hear.
I am not clothed. And the next thing I know is, hi, Joan, this is Jerry Ford. And I'm like, why can't I ever tell this story?
That is so funny.
Please tell me he said, what you doing?
Well, I didn't even get back on the phone and tell my husband. I was afraid he might tell him.
Oh my God, that's
so
hysterical.
funny.
What a great story.
Naked, talking to a former U.S. president.
Wow.
That's
wow. Well, listen, you are yourself a celebrity in your own right. You've been on so many magazine covers through the years, but I think it was, and arguably so, the most memorable and meaningful was the 2014 People magazine.
That was a hard decision.
I mean,
you know, they really tried. They called me early on, right after my diagnosis, and I said I'm away for the summer, and how about we'll talk about this in September. They came to the house with the photographer, and there was a deal. We'll do it with your wig on. We'll do it with like a scarf, and then we'll take off the wig and we'll do it bald. And you can see the pictures, and you can tell us what you're comfortable with. As soon as I saw the pictures, I said, I have to do this.
Yeah.
I have to do this. And, you know, I remember one woman said to me one day after she was diagnosed, and I think I just met her somewhere, was a stranger that said, when I heard the words, the instant I heard the words, you have cancer, I thought about your face on the cover of that magazine. Not your face, mind you, but your smile. And I thought, if she can have that smile, then I'm going to get through this. I thought, wow, okay.
Wow.
That was all worth it.
And you know, and it's a beautiful photo, and it did make such an impact. And I'm happy to say you're cancer-free now for 3 years.
I'm happy to.
Is that, yeah?
Yes, I'm cancer-free, and I'm happy to say that I have an oval head.
Listen, it's not everyone who can be photographed like that and have a beautiful head. It's true, but you're continuing to educate women every single day about breast cancer and about how they can help make sure that they are healthy and they are safe. With your series, At Home with Joan, tell us about At Home with Joan.
Well, I travel around the country and I go into the homes of cancer patients and survivors and talk to them about their journey. And I have come to learn one thing. If you share your story, others learn. And they can also be motivated. You can really motivate people to better honor their health and to get all of their tests so that they can hopefully get early diagnosis, which will mean a better outcome. But what I was really struck by was that when I had interviewed so many medical experts, and then you hear those words, you have cancer, and all of a sudden you realize how little you know about cancer and about chemotherapy. And I was just fortunate. I had great doctors. They put me on the latest, greatest regimen of chemo. They protected me with the medicines that would protect me from the risk of infection, which I didn't really know anything about.
Exactly.
I didn't know that you could end up in the hospital, and a lot of people die from the infection. They don't die from the cancer.
Exactly.
And I said, you know what? If I didn't know this, there's a lot of people that don't know it. And I want to do everything I can to make sure that as anyone is facing this, or a friend or relative that's going through it with them, it's important to be informed. It's important to understand what the risks are of what you're taking for the cancer. And it's important that you understand what different options you have, the choices you have to make sure that you get protected. So you need to be informed, you need to be empowered. And I was a little reluctant to even go for a second opinion. I was kind of old school. But my daughter, who's like 30-something, said, oh, yes, you're going for a second opinion.
It's true.
And, you know, we need to do that these days. We live in a great, wonderful time where there's a lot of incredible treatments. If you're diagnosed today, you have a much better chance of living through it. But you have to ask questions. You have to be empowered.
Right.
And you really have to be your own best advocate in today's world to make sure you get a good outcome.
Yeah. Well, speaking of questions, one of the women that was profiled on At Home with Joan was Joan. And she was asked some lovely questions by a very special lady as well. Take a look.
So, Mom, usually you're the one asking the questions, and today I get to interview you.
Yes, my Jamie, my firstborn child, and one of my children who went to almost every cancer treatment with me.
When I think about my childhood, I think about all of the active things that we did together, and it never would have occurred to me that you could have gotten cancer. You were always Superwoman to me.
Breast cancer can happen to anyone.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. That would have been an amazing interview to sit in. Why Jamie? Why did you pick her?
Oh,
Why
well,
did you pick
by the way, you can go to At Home with Joan and you can see the whole
See the
thing.
whole
And
thing.
it's emotional.
Perfect.
It's a good
Perfect.
one.
You know,
Why her?
they said, why don't we have one of your daughters interview you? And Jamie is in front of the camera. She's in PR, runs a big PR company, but she's also an influencer on social media. She's on camera a lot. I knew she would step right up to the plate and be totally comfortable with it. To be very honest, I never knew that she was going to be as good as she was in the interview. Like, she must have really been paying attention.
Yeah, she's your daughter.
Yeah.
Did you expect anything less?
I was so incredibly pleasantly surprised with how great she was. And, you know, being on the other side of the camera, and I am a lot these days because I do a lot of health campaigns. But in that situation, it's emotional because it's you're vulnerable and you're telling your own story and.
To a child you once carried.
Oh yes,
in your arms.
to the person that you're usually super mom to.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was a tearjerker.
It's
We're
a
all
beautiful story.
We're all vulnerable, you know,
Yes,
whatever point in
we
life.
are.
Thank you so much, Joan. What a wonderful series. You can check it out. Watch Joan's inspirational interviews, one and many, at homewithjoan.com is the destination you need to go to.
Yeah, thank you so much
Thanks,
for all the work
guys.
you're continuing to do.
Thanks.
Thank you. Honestly, you are a living legend, and we're all in awe of you, so thank you for being here.